Hello, everyone. Welcome to Practical Guide to Optimizing Hybrid Cloud Network and Performance, including, for some of you, a power breakfast and a nice thank you. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at phoenixNAP, and joining to me today, awesome guest speaker, Alex Henthorn-Iwane, Chief Marketing Officer at PacketFabric. Welcome, Alex.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. All right, so everyone, stay in your seats to the end. We are going to give away a $100 Amazon gift card. So I will give out the name right at the end. We'll be in touch. You'll get it over email, so it's all easy. Hope whoever wins really enjoys whatever they buy with it. All right, so here we are today, finally, after, I don't know, 7 years of talking about how hybrid cloud is going to be this thing, right? It's actually here, right? And we're starting to see companies move quickly to deploy resources from their on-prem data centers to the cloud, and obviously increasingly cloud to cloud in a multi-cloud fashion. And they're finding real tangible use cases. And in fact, we're seeing that people that went all into the cloud are now finding that hybrid cloud is the best for them, right? Because they've been able to maximize efficiency and agility through some type of hybrid delivery. So we're going to talk through more of that. And according to Flexera, 82% of the companies that they interview claim that they have some type of hybrid cloud strategy. And I understand that that runs the gamut from, you know, basically we talked about it, to some robust implementation of hybrid cloud, but ultimately it's growing leaps and bounds, right? And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking through the details around how it's transforming businesses, how it's presenting new opportunities to companies to allow them to compete better, to save money, to execute and be more agile as an organization. You know, I think ultimately when people get to this point where they say, I wonder if this is for me, this desire to improve the infrastructure flexibility and ease of scale is the winning thought process. It is the reason that people take this opportunity to find their strategy and find their route in this kind of public cloud hybrid data center world, right? And ultimately what they get from this is they get this cost optimization, they get better access to their data, and they really have what we believe is a better experience. So the problem, I guess, the problem statement in front of I want to be hybrid is that it requires some changes, right? And I think ultimately, if you've already made large scale adjustments to try to consume public cloud and your on-prem data center without really any hybridity, right? No real inter networking, nothing of real note, right? We see a lot of organizations out there with a little bit of Azure and a data center footprint, and they basically treat them as separate things, legacy, new, or whatever they come up with to call it, right? Because ultimately, it feels like it is daunting to try to adjust from a networking topology perspective and from an application placement perspective to ensure that you have the best end user experience, whether that's an internal user or an external user, right? And they're worried about this changing metric of like traffic and data transfer and all of these things. And I think that when you're done with today's webinar, you're going to see, you're going to have a couple of ideas of how you can start your investigation into modifying your network and your deployments to hopefully realize the things that we talked about before: better cost efficiency, better agility, better scale. And Gartner's saying that 50% of network operations teams are going to essentially be required to re-architect by 2024 anyway, mostly due to this impact of hybrid networking. But for so many other reasons. Security, information security teams are pressuring network teams to do better than what they've done, right? We still see mass gaps between people that have adopted some sort of network microsegmentation and people that are still relying on network ACLs or nothing, right? So I think there's a lot going on there. So we start getting into these, really tangible benefits and kind of issues that arise out of this idea of hybrid cloud. These are the things that people, not to say that I guess that hybrid cloud is complex and costly and hard to set up. It isn't really, but people think of these things when they're listing out the pros and cons. If I was to sit an IT director down and say, okay, tell me why you want to do hybrid, right? It's likely they're going to mention some of the things down there at the bottom left. Tell me why you're afraid of doing hybrid, and it's likely they're going to mention some of the things down on the bottom right, right? And I think hopefully through today's seminar, you'll realize that maybe it's not as bad as you thought it was, right? Some of these things in the con, while they're not non-existent, it certainly adds some complexity. It has a cost, although you could make I think we will make a tangible argument that it's a cost reducer in a lot of cases. The setup troubleshooting isn't as bad as people think. So Alex is going to spend a lot of time on that, and hopefully you'll feel confident at the end of this seminar that you have a grasp of that. And so when you get to these places, right? You get to these challenges that you face, that as you try to adopt hybrid cloud, you need to find solutions that are flexible meaning from a provisioning perspective and from a performance perspective, without sacrificing the things that you love about your traditional, multi-data center edge networking, right? I know a ton of people on this call today have MPLS networks, SDN networks, right? VPNs all over the place, and they think it's okay, right? Like they think, okay, we're doing okay, we're kind of fine. But if you really start to get down and dirty about it, right? The latency that you're accepting by doing some of these things is intense. Sometimes, depending on the solutions that I just talked about, you can see some pretty intense, jitter and network disruption. And then, I think it'd be a misnomer to say that MPLS networks have massive security problems and software-defined programmable network as a service doesn't. But I think that ultimately your visibility into those challenges is a lot greater, and how you can address them with your information security teams, if you're an InfoSec, how you personally can address them. So you end up with these challenges, and we're going to help you guys try to find some ways to solve that. And so here we are in a position where these middle mile service offerings, companies like PacketFabric are changing the way that organizations consume hybrid interconnection, right? And you get kind of the best of both worlds. It's not like it's like MPLS, except it's software defined and flexible, and you can kind of spin up, spin down, and change your capacity on demand, like all these things that are really hard to execute on in traditional private fabric networks. Really changing the ways that things, disparate locations essentially, are connected to each other, and then sometimes infrastructure is connected to each other, and really helping increase the performance and observability of all of this infrastructure that you're creating, measurable reductions in latency, ensuring that you have great routing, which I guess helps with latency, full redundant mesh networking, and this idea that I can get real hard data and telemetry from services like PacketFabric to help me make better decisions about my networks and about my company. And here, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. He's going to talk about the execution side of this and some of the reasons that customers are looking at technologies like PacketFabric, and then I'll pick it back up at the end and talk a little bit about tangible ways that our customers, pNAP customers, are using technologies like PacketFabric to change their networking and hybrid networking lives. Take it away, Alex.
Cool, thanks, William. And again, thanks for having me here. And Everyone, great to share this time together. I want to propose a way of thinking about the WAN, about the wide area network as it stands today in this new, if this reality is hybrid cloud based today, that essentially the wide area network, the enterprise and wide area network is bifurcating. And there's a whole lot of ways where users reach essentially a service edge of your network, of your enterprise network. And that could be via, so if you have your offices and branch locations and now more remote workers than anybody ever anticipated in the past, plus you have, your consumers for your digital apps they can be coming over the internet, hitting a CDN, going to some edge there. They can be coming over 5G mobile offices and remote workers coming over SD-WANs or SASE, all of that. But ultimately, you're trying to get these users to a service edge. In fact, the whole notion of quote unquote SASE, secure access service edge, is the notion of being able to deliver users in a secure fashion to that service edge, wherever that is. So that's all great. And there's been a lot of movement in the last several years around those sorts of things. And a lot of that really has moved to be a balance of things like MPLS-based, last mile access, but also increasingly internet-based. And that can work fine when you're dealing with user interactions, because the fact of the matter is that user traffic it's not actually that bandwidth intensive. It's really interesting to me that if the assumption is that a web app is relatively light, but maybe the assumption might be, for example, that a Zoom or a WebEx or something is heavy. But there's actually really interesting studies that show that really the bandwidth consumption by a multi-party UCaaS web conference is really not that high. And in fact, in a single site, even in a branch office environment, if you add more of those, it's only an incremental add of bandwidth consumption. So yeah, the internet's fine for that, but there's a whole nother part of the WAN, and that's really what we're calling the cloud core. And that, as we've talked about, and as Willie's talked about, is a hybrid cloud reality. And it involves anchoring around infrastructure like that phoenixNAP provides, as well as various cloud providers, but also your major enterprise SaaS. There's lots of API calls being made to Salesforce, for example, and there's lots of traffic that has to flow up and through, but also across this wide area network, this core, because the way applications are being built today in a hybrid environment is more and more distributed. There's more data moving across things. You think about backup and disaster recovery, those things are moving across this core connectivity in some fashion in a lot of cases. Think about, the increase in analytics and the need to move and migrate data from one place to another to get it into the right place for users or applications to work on it. This is where these mission critical workflows and data flows are happening, and they are happening at volume. Right? So we're not talking about kbps or mbps, right? We're talking about gigabits, and and that scale and that volume is just growing, as we all know. The amount of data being assembled and the need to move it effectively it's just bonkers, actually, is what's happening with it. And there's all sorts of interesting concepts coming around how to deal with all that distributed application footprint, but also your data. There's concepts like data fabrics, right, where you need to figure out how to manage all the placement and movement of all these massive volumes of data so that it can be useful. But at the core of this, you're building this hybrid cloud core. Why? Again, because you want that scalability, you want that agility. And there are even things like, think about the reasons for hybrid and multi-cloud. Let's say, for example, if you're in a business that has a regulatory imperative to have separate places where different parts of applications are running, like payment processing or various other things. there's just so much movement across this of data and workflows. Now, agility is needed for a variety of reasons, but let's think about it this way. There's always a steady state in networking, but I would propose to you that steady state is less and less of a factor in this core. And here's why. You know, if you think about an office or even a campus, how often do you change the switches in the closets? Not very often, right? How often do you just change if you have an office location, you have a certain number of employees there and it's not changing dramatically, how often do you change your last mile connections? Again, not that often, because again, that user-driven bandwidth usage is fairly steady and just goes up kind of, you know, gradually over time, right? There's a point A on the left, there's a point B on the right, you know, and you draw a line, it goes up to the right at some angle. That's certainly the case in the core, but there's a lot more happening in the core that requires more agility in how bandwidth is deployed and made available. So, for example, think about seasonality. You know, there's all sorts of seasonality in business. You may be in a business where seasonality is a big deal in hospitality or in education, or, you know, for that matter, you know, finance and things like that. There are definitely seasons, up seasons and down seasons. For that matter, there'd be just end of the quarter seasons, or where, you know, certain activities are higher across the network, and the network has to be able to flex to that demand. Then there's also just innovation. And what I mean by that is that as the business becomes more digital, there's more shift in how things are happening, and they happen more rapidly over time, right? You want to spin up a new initiative, you want to do a new analytics thing, you want to launch a new digital product. But on top of that, you also have disruptions, changes in the marketplace that could be positive or negative. Let's say you've got some kind of e-commerce thing, and all of a sudden some, you know, influencer mentions your product and your demand blows up in some part of the world as a result. And you have to be able to handle that, and the back-end systems have to handle that, and the core connectivity needs to handle all of that. There's so much more change happening in the core of the network. And so if you want to be successful in this and in the hybrid cloud and achieve the goals, which is be able to flex for the business, you have to think about this core in that way, that there's going to be a lot more demand change in the core than there has been in the past. Now, one of the things that William mentioned is that there's been a lot of inefficiencies in the way that that kind of core hybrid cloud networking has been built, in the sense that if you are just like the way that in SD-WAN, for example, in a branch office, there might not be a reason to backhaul all of your SaaS traffic from your branch office to some distant data center just to pop it out on the internet farther away from the branch office, right? That's not the most efficient routing. That's a latency issue. And whereas, you know, if you're in a branch office and you just want to go to, you know, the edge of some SaaS provider, just go straight there. Well, it's a similar thing. If you're trying to move between various hybrid cloud instances, you know, the direct route is the best route, right? From a latency, performance, and all that kind of thing. But you also want reliability and predictability there. So just want to propose this notion of this cloud core as an essential part of the hybrid cloud infrastructure, and it's really distinct from the user access to the service edge. Now, how has that cloud core been connected traditionally? Well, there's sort of two ways. You know, you could, and let's say, for example, you start off in the cloud, and one of the things that William mentioned is that oftentimes in the past, you would think about your, you know, let's say your cloud instances, you have VPCs and cloud brand X. And what is the first way you start connecting from there to the rest of your enterprise? Well, you're going to probably start with a VPN tunnel. And a VPN tunnel is fine as a starting point, but let's face it, it's not that secure or private. It does not give predictable performance because the internet doesn't have an SLA. It never will. And it's, you know, it's highly variable, you know, performance. And what I mean by that is that if you look at data that measures cloud connectivity, and I happen to come from a background where I was at a company where we actually did do fairly intensive research reports on this. One of the things that's really interesting is that over time, if you look at internet-based, or even to some degree, internet-style backbones, transit-style backbones, just the fact that they're connected to the internet will have some influence of fluctuation over time in latency, in average latency. The problem with that is that any TCP-based application, latency and latency fluctuations are the enemy of predictable performance, right? So it's not just that, yeah, the internet, things can happen and all of a sudden you can be routing really suboptimally, but it's also just on an average basis, you're gonna find fluctuations in performance. On top of that, if you're trying to tunnel across the internet, you just have a scaling limit. I mean, a tunnel, practically speaking, even if you apply a lot of computing power on both ends of it, it really doesn't get above maybe a couple of gigabits per second of throughput. So now if you have to get above that, it's very complex. Now, the nice thing about a tunnel is it's pretty easy to spin up a tunnel, right? But you're carrying a lot of risk with that sort of way. And let's face it, I don't think anyone would consider internet tunnels to be a viable way to build, really any kind of backbone at scale. But it's often the way you start, so that the mindset is, well, tunnels work just fine for SD-WANs. We use them everywhere, but they really don't work at any true scale, and they won't give you predictable performance. Furthermore, the overhead of that tunneling, if you're trying to run anything that has any real throughput requirement, will impose about 100% latency tax on your application, real throughput. And we've actually done this measurement where, for example, we've run Kafka, transactions, and tested them across a VPN versus a private connection, and it's just a dramatic difference in latency. So you pay a high tax. But the reason why some of those kind of VPN sort of approaches are attractive is obviously spinning up a tunnel is easy, because the contrast point is traditional telco style connections. Yeah, they're secure and private. Yes, they give you performance predictability. You got an SLA. That SLA may or may not be the most, let's just say, transparent, but there is a less LA. And but the thing that you don't get, and this is really a toxic trade-off, is the agility part, because look, first of all, it takes a long time to get a telco connection. In most cases, it can take weeks to get a quote and months to actually spin up to deploy. But not only that, typically you got to commit for the long term, oftentimes multi-year, for it to make any kind of economic sense. But the problem, as we said, is that cloud core, there's a lot of shift. What if you're investing in a connection and you say, well, look, I've got to buy for my peak anticipated capacity between these two sites 3 years from now? Just do an area analysis, just draw that graph and say, like, today, I'm at X and I have to plan for Y up and to the right 3 years from now, and I'm automatically wasting all the bandwidth and not using of that, that I've bought for 3 years from now. But it gets worse, because what if demand pattern shifts say that connection is no longer even as relevant as it was? Well, that's a real waste problem. So these kind of connectivity choices are really problematic in the cloud core. And frankly, the whole point of hybrid cloud is to give you that agility to move and build a more digital business so you can move fast and succeed, right? That's the name of the game. So it's pretty much, this is a non-starter as in terms of a long-term strategy. And as William mentioned, a lot of times the traditional way of connecting all these pieces together is that you get these very static connections, even to your cloud providers, even if you do direct connects, and then you backhaul them to these centralized places. Backhauling, when you can go more direct, is not only is there, if you have long-term commits to services, but you're also backhauling them, you're paying, a lot of latency tax, you're paying a sort of a waste tax potentially, and you just have so much less flexibility to deploy to the needs of the business. So what is PacketFabric? Is one of the ways I like to describe us is we're a connectivity cloud. We basically have taken a private optical network built out at massive scale, like a cloud provider. But like the cloud, we've made this network on demand. It's any to any, kind of like the internet within the footprint of what we do, which is a lot of cloud providers, SaaS providers, providers like phoenixNAP. It's private connectivity, therefore much more secure, and it's highly observable because we have a lot of native telemetry that we serve up, including streaming telemetry, so that you can consume the metrics that you need to have the best operations. So the idea is essentially, if you could get the kind of telco style private connectivity with a 5 nines SLA, which we publish, if you do a Google or on PacketFabric SLA, you'll find our SLA is totally published. It's got teeth. It's for real. It's at that same level of premium sort of quality. But also that the backbone that we've built is scalable, and all our services are natively highly resilient and redundant, which is why we can be so forward with the SLA. Now, just to underline the point here, what we're talking about is a carrier class network, but with cloud programmability and kind of elastic consumption. So if you think about this way, we have an optical network. We have leased dark fiber. We have our own DWDM equipment. We have an Ethernet fabric running on top of that. And then all of that is basically built like kind of, you think about how a SaaS would build, it's all API driven. And then on top of that, we have a very easy to use web portal. So it's an API first way of doing this kind of a network. This is, it's a 50+ terabit network backbone. So very scalable. You can compare that to some other very large networks out there. This is a big network. And it's meant so that you can, for example, say, I want to spin up, connectivity to cloud providers or to, in minutes, or I can get various kinds of connectivity between data centers. Obviously, there's still, when you're in a data center, you have to have cross connects. There's some physical realities there. If there's a multi-cloud aspect of that, you can do that literally just like it's software, because if they're hosted direct connections. But you can stitch this all together, and it gets to a level of consumption ease where we actually, between data centers where we have POPs, you can actually consume bandwidth by the hour and by usage, but by the hour. And I'm talking about, like, you can get very high speed connections that go over private backbone by the hour for like cup of coffee level, hourly prices. It's a very cloud-like model. So it gives you so much optionality in terms of flexing your bandwidth and flexing your consumption. Our terms go from monthly to longer, but monthly is where a lot of customers start, because, hey, I can change, I can flex up, I can flex down, that sort of thing. So it's natively multi-tenant, and if you like operating by a REST API, it's completely operationalized for that, as well as via portal. And we deliver a variety of diverse services. So for example, if you were thinking about a Wave, we actually have a turnkey point-to-point connection between data centers, where it's essentially, it's an EPL, right? It's an Ethernet private line, but the underneath of it is natively diverse. So you have that diversity, redundancy, and again, it's just very, very easy to provision this. Then we also have hybrid cloud connectivity from data centers to various cloud providers and even SaaS providers, to internet exchanges, all that sort of thing. And then we have multi-cloud routing, where you can just say, hey, look, I got a portion of things where I need to connect between my Azure instance and some other cloud instance. You can do that as well on a direct cloud routed basis, layer 3 connections underpinned by private layer 2 connections, and optimally routed. We actually spin up multiple VRFs across our footprint in a transparent way too. So wherever you have connections, we just spin up the VRFs. In fact, you can even do multi-cloud routing that includes data center connectivity as well as cloud connectivity, so that you get the layer 2 and the layer 3 aspect of it as well. And custom networking, meaning basically you can assemble all these kind of pieces. I think the picture I want to portray to you is that you can create an optimal cloud core WAN that meets all the privacy, security, SLA, expectations that you want for a business critical wide area network. We can do it in a cloud consumption level way so that you can consume it and change it and flex it the way you need to move with your business demands. And we can give it to you with it's sort of in the form that you want to consume it. You can go into a portal. In fact, you can go into it today and just start. You can do it through an API, and you can think of this as a way to build out all the connectivity you need for your cloud core in a way that really fits with the whole hybrid cloud mindset. And the cool thing about this and why we're doing this webinar together is that we really partner quite closely with PNAP, and it's just such a great complementary way of doing things to build your hybrid cloud anchored by PNAP and connect it all together with this kind of agile WAN connectivity. And so with that, I want to turn this back over to you, William.
Absolutely. Thanks for all that content, Alex. Fantastic work. I think that it's worth mentioning that this map wouldn't exist without you guys, right? Ultimately, PNAP is pushing hundreds of gigabits per second across PacketFabric's networks inside the United States, right? And so a lot of those connections you see in the lower 48 are actually PacketFabric helping us interconnect our data centers, right? For our own purposes, not just for our customers, but we eat our own dog food, right? This is something that we feel very passionate about, not something we just decided to sell because it's hot, right? We're big time consumers. And we've been able to grow that footprint because of our partners, because of people like PacketFabric helping us get flexible connectivity between these regions, right? Redundancy. I think that's another big one, right? Like the cost of redundant connectivity with PacketFabric is, nothing compared to what it is using point-to-points or MPLS or any other type of connection from a data center to data center. So we trust them, we believe in them, and we're working together to find ways for our customers to work with PNAP to enable their own hybrid cloud interconnection. And so a big part of that, as we transition our business, PNAP, the data center in Phoenix, the data center in Ashburn, the data center in Amsterdam, these are great world-class facilities, right? I know a ton of people on the call, our customers, colo customers, they like working with us, they like the facility, we keep the lights on, everything works great. But the data center of the future will look different, right? And ultimately, for the last 10 years, PNAP has been focusing on how we can help customers address infrastructure in all facets, right? Not just data center operations, right? And ultimately, with the launch of our bare metal cloud offering last year and the continued feature enhancement that we're building there, we're at a point now where we're enabling data center as a service. The ability to say, hey, look, I have no assets, but I need stuff in the Netherlands right now, Singapore right now, right? I need servers, I need networks, I need storage, I need it all right now. Everybody, I hope that if you come to this kind of call, you've done something like this in your past, right? Or you're doing it right now. And everybody knows what that looks like. And it's worse right now than it's been pretty much ever, right? In terms of how hard it is to get servers, network switches, routers, storage units, data center, everything, right? And what we're helping do is drive that next generation data center as a service consumption, servers on demand, storage on demand, network on demand, inter-cloud networking on demand with partners like PacketFabric and others, and intra-data center networks, so that our customers can go from one data center in Singapore to the data center in Phoenix and have that predictable, reliable, private network connectivity. So inside of our platform today, you can spin up all these things, and we work with PacketFabric to help you get between our data centers, get to your other data centers that you operate as your quote unquote on-prem currently, and to varying cloud providers across the entire globe. I think it's become a really powerful mission statement. You know, PacketFabric has, you know, private network as a service. PNAP is building data center as a service, right? And we'll continue. We got so many things coming in 2022, 2023, and I know the PF team does too. So I think it's going to be a really powerful combination for the future. And then, you know, when we look at all of the things that people have consumed, right? Why does bare metal cloud and its kind of data center building blocks as a service concept, why does that, what's different? Like, why not just build it myself? Why not just go to AWS or Azure and make it? The reasons are so many, and they vary from customer to customer. It is a lie to say that bare metal cloud is better than Amazon. It's not. It's better in so many ways, but not just flat better, right? Depending on what you're trying to do, it may be absolutely inferior, right? But there's a class of customer that has decided that hybrid is the future, that they want to have control, customization, cost efficiency, right? They don't want to let go of the cloud billing models, but they want privacy, they want security. These things are very hard to accomplish in the public cloud, and they're very costly to build in the private cloud construct. And there is a middle ground, right? PacketFabric has firmly planted themselves in the middle ground. We talked about that middleman as a service, right? The middle ground of inter-networking, right? From the public cloud to the on-prem, from the edge to the data center. That interstitial layer for networking is being, you know, driven by PacketFabric and others. PNAP has said, look, there is this missing interstitial layer of traditional data center and public cloud paths, public cloud paths. You know, I think this is a good opportunity to mention that if you believe that the public cloud is an infrastructure as a service product or product set, you're wrong, right? Like, that's not just me, right? Just go to Gartner and talk to them about it too. But ultimately, they are building a platform that they want you to consume exactly in the way that they want you to consume it, right? And that is very powerful for a lot of people. It has a ton of services, so many services. The general theme of those services happens to be that you are pretty much locked into them forever, right? But they're there and they're consumable, and for some organizations, it makes a ton of sense, right? PNAP doesn't have some, you know, fantastical serverless, you know, infrastructure across 180 data centers worldwide, right? And there are some applications that need that, right? But you pay, I mean, if you look at the actual cost to make that computational, you know, process function, it's a lot of money on a process by process basis. And that is fine because the options are very limited. They don't exist basically to replicate it in any other fashion. And so you pay what you pay. But for those of you that are in public clouds, Azure using Azure VM, Google using VMs, AWS using EC2 and S3, and you basically picked up your data center and moved it to public cloud, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm in the cloud, right? You're not using AWS, right? You've lost all control, you've lost all your flexibility, you've lost all your agility. Well, maybe you've gained some agility in terms of you can spin up more of it fast. Cost control's out the window. Predictable cost is out the window. And you haven't really transformed anything. You haven't entered into any type of real application transformation that can make public cloud powerful, does make public cloud infrastructure or platform as a service powerful. And so the idea here is connect everything on demand build the infrastructure that you build on-prem on demand and deliver it to your customers. And so I hate it when people call things cloud, but then they have all these like non-cloud capabilities, right? You have to be programmable, infinitely programmable, right? You have to work with common, continuous CI/CD integration and delivery platforms. You have to have infrastructure as code at the foundation of what you do, and it has to be flexible enough to be hourly at a minimum. We certainly have customers in this platform that would love to see per second, and per second challenging with actual physical servers. But I mean, the idea for a cup of coffee, like Alex said, like I have demos, Ansible demos, Terraform demos that RSCs and SAs run that literally can pick up infrastructure, deploy applications, create a complete high-speed network between one of our data centers and a public cloud provider, turn up a public cloud service like RDS and AWS, right? And have 100 gig between these two locations and run it for an hour for $5, right? Not to say that that's an actual use case, but it's doable, right? And so that's the power of what we're doing and working together. I'll leave that there for everybody to kind of look through. We're trying really hard to make this feel like if you like Azure VM, if you like EC2, if you like Google Cloud Compute, we're going to give that experience to you the way that you interact with it today, but we're going to give you dedicated infrastructure that you can do whatever you want to do. And it is going to be infinitely less expensive than what you have today from the public cloud. And some people look at that and they go, whoa, like what? Like how's that even possible? And the straight up honesty is that I certainly cannot make physical servers that cost $6 a month, right? But if you have a M6 large, I've got dedicated infrastructure that is yours that far exceeds the performance profile of an M6 large, right, for less money, right? And I think that for production applications, that is super powerful, right? And then you can get into all the other cool things that we're doing with it, that this isn't really a bare metal cloud roadmap, right? But like so many other cool things you could do. Okay, so I'm gonna have Alex, if you'll click on the polls area over there, Alex, and launch the poll in your GoToWebinar area there. Yep, perfect. This is the best way for our organizations to not bother you if you don't want to talk to us, right? And so if you are interested in PNAP solutions, hit the top one. If you want to talk to PacketFabric and you're not interested in us at all, click the middle one. And if you are not interested in talking to anybody, it's not going to hurt our feelings. Thank you for coming and listening today. And we will keep you on our list, but we will not contact you about this webinar at all. And if you want to talk to both of us at the same time, just let the person that you contact know that you also are interested in these other solutions, and we will help bridge that gap. So we'll leave it for just another few seconds here. Let's try to get the 35% voted here. Even if you don't want to be contacted, just hit the button so we can get to 35%. And then we'll have all the data points that our marketing teams need to execute. All right, Alex, you can go ahead and shut that poll down and move to the next one. All right, so this is your opportunity. While we have anything in the background, I'm going to check my Slack here and see if our illustrious teams posted any of the questions that anyone has from the question area into the thing. I did answer a question. Somebody talked about network as a service as a strategic initiative, right? Modern networks, Alex, maybe you could touch on that. Like, why do you feel like having a modern, flexible network as a service can be strategic for organizations?
I think the way to think about it is this: what strategic initiatives do you have as an IT organization that, if you run into all sorts of network friction, become a lot harder to execute? I think that, let's be realistic, that if you were to compare network connectivity, and I'm trying to exhibit some like appropriate humility, that network connectivity is not as important as your company's data, all right? Your company's data is super, super strategic. But if you can't move that data effectively, then whatever strategic plans you have for that data are going to, kind of fall into a hole, right? So I think the idea of network as a service, thinking about changing the way that you architect, the way that you approach, the expectations that you hold for the network, is strategic because of the big strategic rocks you're trying to move for the business as an IT, as an IT team. So that's the way I would think about it. Is you have the option to make the network a strategic enabler or not. And I think there's only one really good answer to those options. So that's how I would think about it.
Absolutely. I think that, certainly if you look at some things like mergers and acquisitions, right? The ability to quickly connect two enterprises together, right? Post-merger, like Alex, you and I have been in this market a long time. You know what it means if you use AT&T MPLS, right? Like, oh, okay. Like, what if you both use, one of you uses AT&T and the other one uses Verizon? Like, I don't even want to think about the levels of hell that you would enter to try to facilitate that connection quickly. It's doable, certainly doable, but quick is not that. And we actually work with it all the time. We work with companies that are trying to connect to payment networks or whatever, and the only way to do that is over some ancient MPLS fabric with Verizon. And it's 7 months, 8 months to get that done, and you're just like scratching your head going, what the heck, man? I'm glad that companies like PacketFabric exist, because ultimately it's facilitating connectivity in a way that assists everything else, right? Data sharing, cost efficiency, agility. It's insane. And I think we'll just do one more here, and then we'll get to the little drawing. So I'll take this last one. Why? Some people will actually ask why bare metal? Like, what is it about metal that makes it interesting? Why not just use virtual machines? They're cheaper for us as a provider. And ultimately, what we see is dedicated infrastructure provides consistency of performance that is unachievable in the public cloud. If you are looking for let me take it one step. Certainly you can go get dedicated or metal instances from public cloud providers today, but like, if you've looked at that price point, you don't want any part of that, right? But for the majority of like their everyday workload, if you just fire up an Azure VM, fire up an AWS EC2 instance, a standard instance, run your application, you will see measurable differerences in the performance over time. With dedicated infrastructure, unless you cause those differences, you will not see measurable differences over time, right? And so I think that we see a lot of people that are in media and entertainment, people that are in voice infrastructure, people that are in AI, HPC, all these kind of workloads, databases. They make huge differences in having that dedicated infrastructure. And then when we look at, at how we execute the services portfolio that we deliver to our customers, things like disaster recovery as a service, we're able now to build that infrastructure programmatically on demand, interconnect it, your enterprise from your data center with companies like PacketFabric instantaneously in many cases. Because Alex, how many data centers is PacketFabric in? Like 80, 70, 100?
Think about like 300.
300, right? So like, what are the odds that you're in one of those data centers, right? Big time odds. So ultimately, if you're co-located today, the chances are that either we're in the same facility, you're in a PNAP facility, or you're connectable instantaneously between wherever you're at and wherever we are at. And that allows you to take advantage of all the platform services that we've created. So I don't think I've been as excited about the future of modern infrastructure as a service, network as a service, that I have in a long time. And there's certainly going to be places for platforms. There's certainly going to, you're never going to see some massive, data science platform owned by PNAP, built by PNAP, that you can, like Amazon SageMaker. We're never going to have the IoT fabric thing that you use to do the messaging back and forth from a managed service. But if you are interested in building those things yourself, or you don't need those things and you have traditional applications that you want to keep running for the next 10 years, there's a better way. So I'll leave it there. Let's get to the drawing, Alex. I think it's the next slide. All right, let me see here. I've got the winner. It is Ben Esther, IT engineer. I won't say the name of the company. So, but yeah, Ben, we will reach out. We will get you your Amazon gift card. Thanks for everyone for attending. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope everyone loved it. And I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, thanks a lot, William, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's been great.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great one.